Hi guys, welcome to Intent. I'm your host Ronald. Today I have Kelly Eyre with me. We're going to be discussing autism. It is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month. This topic is very close to my heart. As a parent with a son that has autism, it's very important to raise awareness. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't know. I'm sure you, as the listeners, there's a lot of stuff that you are not aware of, even though there's a lot of information on the internet. So today, Kelly is going to be taking us through her journey as somebody that was diagnosed with autism and somebody who is a parent with a child with autism. So it's going to be a very interesting and educational episode. Hi, Kelly. How are you?
Our next new Ronan.
I'm good. I'm good. So we're going to get into it. I just want to unpack the definition of autism. There's I know, a lot of misunderstanding about autism, which we're going to get into. But just in terms of the listeners, so autism is a neurodevelopmental condition. So it affects the brain, the way the brain works, the way information is processed, and the way individuals experience the world socially, emotionally, and sensory wise. So Kelly's going to be taking us through her journey from the beginning until now. So Kelly, you can just take us through in terms of your personal journey.
So we had noticed during probably at the end of COVID that there were certain large gaps with Aaron. Specifically, his speech came into the forefront of, what we assumed was going to be the beginning of what we then knew as a developmental language delay. And it was later through obviously the gaps that became a little bit bigger that we were dealing with more than just a language delay in terms of his speech. He had started acting out quite aggressively. He had started biting more frequently. We've had an incident of him where he climbed up a 2.5 meter fence to get out of a school before. So it was definitely something that was it was in our face, but I think as a parent, you'll know, especially one who is raising a child on the spectrum, you kind of go into denial. You kind of have the background, which I did. I mean, I had my honors degree by that point in counseling psychology and kind of should have known better, I think, as a parent. But I think when it's your own, those blinkers go up. And I had kind of linked it always to it was COVID. We were very limited who we were in contact with. Family was too far away. So it sort of adds to the denial that you think is there. And it ended up so that both my boys went to visit their grandmother in Ladysmith. And my mom-in-law, and I appreciate for what she did it now, she took him to a specialist. And it sort of gave us the label of autism. And I think that's kind of the hardship that when you hear it is that you say there's that misunderstanding. And I think you can study it
Mm,
till any day of the week. It doesn't make sense sometimes until it's right in your face. Um, and I
mm,
sort of had been noticing differences, I think, within myself from then or probably just before. And I kept going to GPs who kept saying, no, you're depressed, or we were heading towards bipolar, or, it was severe manic depression, and it didn't kind of ever sink. It didn't ever make sense. And I had been through medications and antidepressants, and it wasn't clicking. And Aaron had been down, I think, a
mm,
year of his journey already with his autism diagnosis, and I had seen the improvements in him already, and I think we noticed those small improvements from sort of the get-go. And I ended up back with another GP, a different GP this time, and we were sort of speaking about Aaron. And she brought up my childhood a little bit, and there were sort of these little similarities, although they were so different. The one was that,
mm,
Aaron started verbalizing. I mean, he only started speaking properly in sentence structures 18 months ago, and he's 8 years old now. Where with me at 9 months old, I was having sentence structure. I was having full conversations with people at 9 months and only walked at
mm,
18 months. So there were those little things that sort of started flagging a little bit, where Aaron's was so different. I mean, he started walking at 9 to 10 months. He was up and ready to go. So there were those differences that you sort of find the comparisons to. And then I
Mm.
came to understand through Aaron what stimming was, seeing it in real time and sort of going, but I do something similar almost. So those little similarities were always there in the beginning, especially when Aaron got diagnosed. And she had always said to me, have you ever considered that maybe you are on the spectrum? And I sort of took it back a little bit and went, no, can't be, not me. It didn't present like Aaron did. It was there, but it wasn't.
Mm.
And 2 weeks later, I had a phone call with Aaron's specialist, and I sort of like brought it up in conversation. I got the courage and I said, listen, I've sort of had this conversation with the GP, and I'm sort of experiencing this, and we spoke about it a little bit. And I was like, do you feel that I hate the word qualify, but do you feel I sit in that range of spectrum? And he said to me, Kelly, I've been waiting for you to ask me that question for 2 years. And I kind of got a little bit frustrated because I was like, why didn't you tell me? And he's like, because it's not my job to tell you. It's not my job to label every single person that walks through my door. But since you found the familiarity in it and you found it, you've kind of come along this journey to sort of figure it out a little bit. And I think for me, growing up in the 90s was very difficult. I was always considered gifted. And when I got to high school, that giftedness disappeared. It completely disappeared. My memory started fading. I wasn't fitting into the norm. I very rarely fitted in general in social cues. So looking back at that, I now understand more of who I was and what I was coping with. And it's sort of slightly made me a better human being, but it's also slightly made me more aware of what is it and what we need to advocate for. And because I am a level 1, meaning that I require lower support than most or different leveled spectrums, I'm very much casted aside in terms of, but you're coping, but you're fine. You don't have autism. And that's been the most frustrating, being an adult and coming out with it and saying, I'm autistic, and people going, but no, you're not, you function, you speak, it is very, very frustrating. And since I've built my platform for over a year now, that's the biggest thing I get hit with. But you speak at conferences, but you
Yeah.
Okay, so you spoke about your diagnosis and your son's diagnosis. As a parent who was on the spectrum, how is it parenting?
extremely difficult, because coming to learn and to understand that my meltdowns look very different to his, it can be very, very difficult, especially because not all the time, but sometimes when he is having a meltdown or it's heading to that meltdown, my brain will often do its own thing where it will become more frustrated or less patient. I found that's been the greatest challenge, where we all literally have a meltdown at the same time. And I often give this story at conferences where I've actually had to reach the point now where if I know something's coming, because I have internal meltdowns, mine are not often external, they're very much internal, where I zone out or become not short-tempered. I don't think short-tempered is the right word, but I become very short and just trying, I think, to mediate what's happening in my own head. So I will often say to Aaron, you're irritating me. Please just leave me alone. And often when I say this at teaching conferences, people are like, oh, how can you say that? And my answer is simple, because I have to teach him how to advocate for himself when he's experiencing something like that, where whether it be a meltdown or a sensory overload, I've got to be able to model how it should happen. And often, 9 times out of 10, when that does happen, I will go
Yes.
to him and I will say to him, Aaron, mom was having a meltdown. It's not your fault, but please understand this is what has to happen. Because my aim for that is to give him the same tools that as his language progresses and it becomes more of the conversation that you and I are having now, he will be able to say to someone, please, not now, give me space, and then deal with it in the way that he's been tasked to from therapies, from OTs, and to be able to use it in connection. I think it also forms a large part of my understanding. Like I said earlier, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one, and they do not come with a handbook. But I think for me, it's been a lot of acceptance more so of what he's going through to sort of give myself a little bit more grace. But he is a joy now, and he always has been a joy. I mean, there's no point that you reach where they go, they're better or they're cured or there's something, but he is a lot more manageable than what he was. And that has come from, being with the right therapist, being on the right medication, being with the right individuals. And it's become a lot easier. I think when he was three and a half, I don't think I did understand him as much as I do now. But I think him and I is about learning how to parent with grace and to parent with the understanding that there are differences, but I think that's also learning in having a spectrum child that there is a line drawn sort of between the typical age a child is behaving. So Aaron is now 8, and 8-year-olds push buttons. That's what they do. But it's also then seeing the other flip of the side to go, what is fueling his autistic behaviors? And I think it's understanding that there's a line in between that, and then there's a line in between me as well. There are things in my life that are stressful as an adult, as a mom, as a wife, but there are certain things where I've got to be slightly more gentle on in terms of if I'm having a difficulty or if I'm having a sensory overload. Or so I think for me, parenting, that is learning how to parent myself and be a parent, but also be a parent to both a neurotypical child, because my youngest is neurotypical and my oldest is neurodivergent. So I think there's a divide line between that, but I do think it does make it parenting a little bit more challenging. My husband definitely has far greater patience in certain things than I do, but then I often look at it and go, it's my sensory, or it's my overthinking, or it's my looping. And sometimes I've got to come back to sort of be like, children are children as well, and adults are adults, and we're kind of figuring this out. And funny enough, I run a parenting course, which is, I have good chuckles about myself about that sometimes. But at the end of the day, and I've always said this, we are going to make a mistake or two, and we are going to mess them up a little bit, and we're not perfect parents in any stretch of the imagination, but it's how we bounce back, and it's how we rectify those lows, and how we correct it. And I've often had to correct myself to go, sure, Kelly, that's a little bit too much or a little bit too less, or don't overthink it. So it's that constant fight of my own brain having to then grow and soothe and mentor his as well, but then still acknowledge at all times that we're different and that it's okay to be different. I have a lot of friends, well, not a lot of friends, but I have literally that I can count on my hand, and each one of them is neurodivergent. Two of my friends are ADHD. My one friend is AUDHD. So that I have found has been the greatest parenting in my way, because I'll phone one of them and be like, this is happening, I don't know how to deal with it. And they'll sort of guide you, or they'll sort of say to you, but Kelly, that's normal. That for me has been the greatest parenting support, is especially moms who have older autistic children as well. Aaron's principal from last year, her son is also on the spectrum. I think he's 20 now. So often going to her and saying to her, listen, this is what I'm feeling, or this is what I'm experiencing, for her to then say to me, but Kelly, that's normal and it's okay. And you will, we'll talk about it. And I think that's helped my parenting in being neurodivergent and raising a child who's neurodivergent as well.
I do think, even with me personally, there's blurred lines between him just being a child and, okay, are these the is this the contributing factor to him being on the spectrum? There's that very thin line. And I'm so glad that you have that support system where they can, kind of get you out of the loop, or let you know that no, he's just being a child, or no, Kelly, this is just, life's challenges. Yeah, for me, I feel like that is just a blessing, because not a lot of people have that type of support where there are people that actually are in the position to understand what they are going through. Um, for parents like me who don't have that kind of support structure where, there are people that personally know what you're going through, where or how can they access that type of support?
I think it's not an easy, straightforward answer. And I think if I look back on the last, sure, 4 years with Aaron, I think finding my community has only really been in the last year. It honestly has. It's something that has taken a long time to form, because I think, like you say, parents are so quick to judge and they're so quick to assume, and the pipes of advice that come. I remember in the beginning when Aaron was asked to leave I think his second school at that stage, and we had to make the hard decision for him to go stay with his grandmother for 8 weeks before she lived with us. And I remember putting
Mm.
it on a group. I will never forget this. I remember putting it on a neurodivergent group, or whatever it was called at the time. And I put the story out to say, this is what I'm going through. We've had to make the hard decision. And the amount of moms, Ronan, that came back and said to me that I was abandoning my child was astounding. And it was really hard, because I think, and I've always said this,
Mm.
even parents in the autistic community or neurodivergent, whatever that may look like, are very super critical. They are very, very super critical, because I think they come from a space where they themselves have been so criticized. There were one or two moms that, I still speak to today. I've
Yes.
never met them in person, but they still reach out. They know Aaron by name. We check in every now and then. But I think what's the most important is to be honest about your child. I found that when I was more open and honest about Aaron, I found that a lot more moms gravitated, and it would be simple spaces. It would be like a playground. It would be like, no, but
Mm-hmm.
my son is also on the spectrum, or my son is also dealing
Mm.
with that as well. But I think a lot of your connection, as much as they were so negative, are those neuro support groups. And I've seen it has become better over the years, where parents, I think because it's become more talked about since Aaron was diagnosed. We're our 5th year in. So I think creating the space, but also creating the boundary that
Mm.
if you are going to go into groups, to be like, I'm not going to be judged here. I'm going to put out what I need. And whomever doesn't accept that, doesn't accept that. I've also found a lot of community. Aaron
Mm.
went into remedial this year. He went into what we refer to as cottage schooling this year. And I found a lot of solace in those moms, because they get it on different levels. And even
Mm.
if it's just that 5-minute parking lot conversation of, oh, I battled with this, or I struggled with this, or how are you doing over the school breaks? That little bit of camaraderie, you don't necessarily have to
Mm.
have 50 people supporting you. You just need a good 3 or a good 2 that can help with that as well. So definitely, I
Mhm.
think school, if your child is in a remedial school, definitely form relationships with those parents, because a lot of them are going through similar experiences. And I think birthday parties are the one. We recently had Aaron's 8th birthday party, and it was amazing to see the family that did come support, and friends. And a lot of the moms that we invited, I'd get a WhatsApp back, and it would be like, this is the first birthday party they've ever been wanted at or invited to. And that breaks me as a mom. That really, really
Wow.
does. But if I can
Mm.
provide an afternoon where there's no judgment, and literally the people that we've built over these 5 years,
Mm.
there isn't that judgment to Aaron. They are who they are, and we accept it for whatever that may look like. So I think definitely finding school groups, finding small individuals. I mean, if you were to comment on something in a group, and a lot of the moms do nowadays, they say, listen, I'm drowning, I'm not coping. Most of us will message the mom privately, or we don't have to publicly display it. And sometimes it's just about having that outward connection. And I've had
Yes.
that in the last 3 weeks. I had a friend, a very good friend that I worked with in my teen years. She reached out to me and she said, look, she has this really good friend. They've literally just received their autism diagnosis of their son. And my first thing is, and I often will do this, I'll be like, tell the mom to Google me. Tell the mom to Google me to understand who I am. I've often done that. And it's not from a gloat point, it's from a go read what
Mhm.
I've said. And if you're comfortable in talking to me, I will phone you immediately. Because I think sometimes when we get those diagnoses, a lot of people will go, is the
Okay.
child okay? Is my first point of call with parents when I connect with them is, and it's always been, is my first question is, how are you, mom? How are you dealing with this today? Sometimes we'll often
Mm,
rush to the spectrum child, and the
mm,
parent sort of gets left behind. The same thing happens when you have a baby. Everybody wants the baby, but they don't want, the mom that might be battling with it behind closed doors. So often, like you spoke earlier about in the beginning about an in with
yeah.
your son, I like to find an in with parents, because sometimes you don't want to be too much, and you don't want, like, they've just received this diagnosis. You don't want to be adding on to it of what might be or what could
Mm,
it be. Because I think that's what as moms we do. We kind of look for, like, is there anyone who went through this and the outcome was perfect on the other side? Not necessarily that that outcome is perfect on the other
yeah.
side, but even with this mom, I said to my friend, let her Google
Mm,
me, let her find out who I am, let her listen to a podcast or two, and if she's comfortable, give my number right away. And I think it's just about saying,
mm,
are you okay? What do you feel about all of this? Because at the end of the day, and I say this with much due
mm,
respect, it's not a death sentence. It's a different journey with a different
mm,
tour guide. And my Lord, do I love mine. And I think for me,
yeah.
it's just about connecting with that one person, Ron. And you don't necessarily need an army. But if you have that one person who is like, listen, I had a bad day, no kids played with him today, sort of to be like, it's okay. That doesn't make you any less. That's where support comes from. Because I will often say to
Mm,
moms, has anyone told you that you are a good mom? Because I don't think we hear it enough. I think we hear
mm,
so much of
we
this
don't.
there. We don't. We hear therapy sessions. We hear this didn't happen at school, or your child is not achieving in this. And you kind of then amount that to, I'm a bad mom, and you're not. You're carrying what somebody isn't.
Mm,
And what I carry with Aaron is not what you carry with
yeah.
your child. It's completely different. But it does make me grateful
Yeah.
sometimes when,
Mm,
Aaron is verbal, irrespective of what that verbal looks like. I mean, luckily for us now, it's sentences. He's fully potty trained. He goes to school. He eats everything you give him, and he wears any type of clothing. That is not a luxury for other parents. It's not at all. And I think what I've
yeah.
learned from support is that you can't sit there and go, have you tried this? Have you tried that? I mean, what we did to get Aaron potty trained is not what the next parent would need to do. And I think sometimes we get so bognated, and this is why I often, like,
Mm,
in my mind, I'm now thinking where you're like, how do you get support? I think you have to filter your support, because none of the people in my circle judge me for what I do with Aaron or what I need to do with Aaron. And the way that they give, I don't necessarily think it's
mm,
advice, but the way that they give suggestion is sort of like, well, we did this, you can try it. I don't know if it's going to work, but rather say, oh, we did that and it was perfect and it worked. Because I've seen
mm,
that on support groups where somebody will go,
mm,
I potty trained my child, and everybody will go, okay, but how did you do it? I'm clearly doing it the wrong way. And I think that just creates a lot of judgment. So for me, in even creating
yeah.
a support group, I vet people. I don't know if that's just an autistic thing. I don't know if it's a mom thing. but I honestly watch how you are with my child, and I watch
I
what
think
that
both.
support. Yes, yeah. And I I what I love about my kid
Mm.
specifically is the fact that he has no filter, and if he's not comfortable around somebody, he's going to tell me that it's a no go, and it's a I'm not. That we're very good at that type of thing, that like filtering of that like in. And I think once you have that in, and somebody
Mm.
can see that, I mean, Aaron is Aaron. He's Aaron before the diagnostic. He's Aaron before the stimming. He's Aaron. Because somebody once asked me,
Yes.
they said to me,
Yes.
they said to me, do you wish Aaron didn't have autism? And my answer is, I don't know what Aaron is without autism. I don't. I can't tell you. My wish for Aaron
Yes.
is that I wish that he didn't have to struggle. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that I wish he didn't have to struggle with what other children may do so simply or so easily. But I don't know what he looks like without autism. I don't know what that looks like, because that's Aaron. That's
Mm.
who he is, and what he will always be
Mm.
accepted as and be. So support systems are hard. It's a not, like I said in the
Mm.
beginning, it's not a straight copy and paste answer. But I think just finding that one person that you
Mm.
can speak to is the most important of it all.
Because we do a lot of self-blaming, especially in the beginning when, we do receive the diagnosis. So in terms of, vetting your support, being more discerning of the people that you surround yourself with and your family with is extremely important. It is extremely, extremely important. We are going to wrap it up. I know we had some connection issues, but you definitely going to be on, if you agree, back on the podcast, because there's a lot that I want
Anytime.
to unpack, especially in terms of you mentioned cottage schooling.
Yes.
Yes, is that specific to neurodivergent kids? It's specific. You can
It's
just
not, it's not
briefly explain.
It's not necessarily only reserved for neurodiverse children. What it basically means is it's a different type of environment where you have different types of children. In general, in terms of your neurodiversity, I mean, at Aaron's school, he's got a girl that has ADHD, and she's got PTSD. So it's not necessarily just reserved for one space. Cottage schooling is sort of your idea of homeschooling,
Okay.
but it's with other individuals. It's not simply done with
Mhm.
a parent and a child. It's with other individuals who face similar or
Okay.
connected struggles. And what they then do is they work on there's multiple platforms. There's Think Digital, there's Cambry Learn. So basically what it is that it's a teacher sitting with them to do the academic side of it. And then in the other portions of the day, they're doing other things. They're doing sensory, they're doing puzzles, they're learning about social interactions and social skills. So it's this idea of community, but in a smaller way, where academics is not just the only focus. It's also about connecting with others, learning about society and how we operate in the society. So for cottage schooling, it's just a space and an environment that takes the formality of school out, and it excites their love of learning. But they're learning at their own level and at their own speed. The school that Aaron goes to, they break down their grades. So like on a Monday, they'll do all the English for the week. On a Tuesday, they'll do all the math for the week. So they're only fundamentally doing between an hour to 2 hours of academic schooling in the day. And the rest of it, they're focusing on social cues, social interaction, working with their peers. And the biggest advantage for us with Aaron, not that he's had one this year, but their whole philosophy that if a child has a meltdown at school, they work them through that meltdown. They don't just send them home. So it's about them learning how to socially interact with
Mm.
their peers, but also that they're getting the academics done in that formal capacity of schooling, but without the pressures of mainstream in that way.
Mm. Okay, I love that it's holistic. So they address the emotional, the social part, the academic part.
Correct.
I
And
absolutely. I loved it.
And
Yeah, I.
the idea of cottage
Mhm.
schooling is also that if a child wants to and they are able to, it gives them the option to go back into mainstream once
Mm.
they've caught up with that skill development, because that is still our hope for Aaron. But if he would prefer to stay in cottage schooling, he will stay
Mm.
there until his matric is completed.
Oh, okay. 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 Thank you for that. Thank you
Of
for
course.
last words for adults that are on the spectrum that have just been diagnosed, and also for parents that have kids on the spectrum.
I think the biggest thing that came out of the last 2 years was sort of this idea, or this quote that I've come up with in terms of acceptance of autism, is that a lot of people feel that you need to move me to another table in order for me to be accepted. And this is where I break the mold on that. You do not need to move me to another table. You just need to make enough room for me to sit there and give me a comfortable chair. And if you can't find one, I'll bring my own. And I think that's sort of the idea of what I think of when I advocate for inclusion. And I've been asked this question quite a bit of what does inclusion look like? Inclusion is not a policy. Inclusion is about standing your ground and being who you are without having the rules broken so far that you are the exception to the rule. You are allowed to be in this space and you're allowed to shout it loudly. And it's not something that is an excuse. It is, and I've always said this, it is something to be proud of. You are able to grow other people by just saying it, grow other people by advocating and saying, I am on the spectrum and I deserve that space at that table more than anybody else, or no less than anybody else. And I think the most phenomenal people are those who are on the spectrum and can acknowledge it and know fundamentally that they can make change, that it doesn't make you less, it doesn't make you anything disadvantaged. You just got to find a way to work around a system that is not molded for you. And that's both as an adult advocating for autism and for a child that's advocating for it as well. Tell me I can't do something and watch me prove you wrong. But I hope that it won't always be like
Yes.
that. I hope that there will eventually be a plateau where it's this continuation of just acceptance. It's a continuation of just being who we want to be. And yes, it happens to be called autism and it happens to have a name. But that name, like I said before, I am before it. And I just feel for parents that you don't have to be ashamed. You don't have to be embarrassed. You have a perfect little gift, as perfect as anybody else sitting next to you. We've just got to figure out more systems that work and that better able any individual child. I don't think it's just about neurodivergency. I have watched neurotypical children struggle as well in learning or whatever the case may be. It's sort of the adaptation of that system I spoke about earlier, where it's just not fitting for us. It's not fitting in terms of women being diagnosed. It's not fitting in terms of it only being a boy problem. I think what needs to fundamentally change is that system. But until that system changes, advocate loudly. Advocate for those that need it. That it doesn't, Autism Awareness Month it shouldn't just be about the month. It shouldn't just be about April 2nd. It should be every month of every day. And it's not just accepting the idea of us. It's about accepting us in general. And that's the most important part of it as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Kelly, for
Thank you
being
very,
on the
very much.
platform
Of
and
course,
using your
anytime.
voice to advocate.
Anytime.
Okay. Thank you to the listeners for listening to this episode of Intent. We will have Kelly back on the platform sometime during this year, definitely. Thank you so much, Kelly. And
Thank you.
until next time, to our listeners, until next time, continue living with intent. Okay, bye.
Bye.